The city of New York glimmered with its usual arrogance that evening, streets vibrating with the rhythm of ambition and wealth. Yellow cabs honked impatiently, pedestrians crossed without looking, and the towering skyline cast its long shadows over a district where only the privileged walked comfortably. In the heart of Manhattan stood a building that many envied and few entered, Richard Halloway's private art gallery. Within its walls, pieces worth more than entire neighborhoods rested behind glass and velvet ropes. The billionaire himself loved to boast that his collection rivaled any museum in the country. To his guests, he was the king of refinement. To his staff, he was a man whose smile hid disdain. Among those staff members was Evelyn Carter. 48 years old, she moved silently along polished marble floors, the smell of lemon cleaner lingering as she wiped a banister no one would ever touch. Her uniform was plain, her posture unassuming, but her eyes, deep, steady, and searching, betrayed something few noticed. She had once been a woman of discipline, a woman who followed orders in the rigorous world of the U.S. Army. That chapter of her life had ended decades ago, leaving her with skills that didn't quite fit the life of a maid. Still, those skills had never abandoned her. They surfaced in the way she stood, the way her shoulders squared when someone addressed her, and the way her gaze lingered a second longer on things others ignored. The elite patrons drifting through the gallery rarely spared her a glance. To them, Evelyn was furniture, quiet, reliable, invisible. She didn't mind. Invisibility had its advantages. But the loneliness that accompanied it weighed on her some nights, especially when she thought of her daughter Jasmine, studying at a small college upstate. Every extra hour Evelyn worked meant another bill paid, another semester secured. She cleaned for Jasmine's future, not for recognition. "Careful with that frame," Richard Halloway barked at a young intern struggling with a minor adjustment. His voice echoed across the hall, sharp as glass. Evelyn continued polishing without reacting, though she had grown used to his tone. He treated everyone below him as tools, but Evelyn had long since learned to ignore arrogance. Marcus Diaz, head of security, entered from the far hall. A former NYPD officer with a thick build and a pragmatic stare, he noticed Evelyn's efficiency more than anyone else. "Evening, Evelyn," he said casually. She nodded. "Evening, Mr. Diaz." He smirked at her formality. "One day, you'll just call me Marcus." "Maybe," she replied, lips curving faintly. She didn't waste words, she measured them the way she measured everything. The evening crowd thickened as wealthy collectors sipped champagne and discussed paintings with exaggerated reverence. The air smelled of perfume, wine, and money. Yet Evelyn's instincts, those sharp remnants of her training, kept her scanning. She noticed more than art. A man lingering near the entrance longer than most. A delivery that had arrived too late in the afternoon. A flicker in one of the security lights. These details slipped into her awareness naturally, like breathing. But for now, her focus returned to the rhythm of work. Cloth against glass, footsteps echoing, whispers of admiration for canvases that seemed lifeless to her compared to the reality of her own struggle. Evelyn's world was survival, not luxury. As she bent to gather her supplies, a thought crossed her mind like an instinctive warning. Something about this night would be different. She couldn't place it yet, but her chest tightened with a quiet certainty, and that certainty, though unspoken, would change everything. If you want to know how Evelyn's unseen past collides with the danger about to unfold, make sure to subscribe right now. Her journey is just beginning, and what hides behind her silence will soon be revealed. The night in Manhattan was far from over, and neither Evelyn nor the glittering gallery had any idea of the storm preparing to break its doors. Morning light spilled across the Bronx neighborhood where Evelyn Carter lived, filtering through the thin curtains of her modest apartment. The air smelled faintly of coffee from the neighbor next door, and the rumble of traffic below reminded her she had only a few minutes to finish tying her shoes before the bus arrived. Her body moved with precision, her habits unchanged from years of training. Yet the mirror reflected a woman the world never noticed, lines etched by long shifts, shoulders bent slightly from carrying more than her share, eyes both tired and unwavering. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from Jasmine lit the cracked screen. "Morning, Mum. Got a paper due today. Wish me luck." Evelyn's lips curved into a smile that softened her whole face. She typed back quickly, "You've got this. Remember focus and discipline." Jasmine often teased her for sounding like a drill sergeant, but beneath the playful tone, Evelyn knew her daughter valued those words. They were the reason Jasmine had made it this far, out of the neighborhood into college. The bus ride to Manhattan was long, crowded, and noisy. Evelyn sat quietly with her bag in her lap, eyes trained out the window. She noticed details others ignored, the way a man shifted too quickly into an empty seat, the unusual silence of a teenager with his hood pulled low. She didn't judge, she simply observed. Old habits. Arriving at the gallery, she clocked in without fanfare. The marble floors gleamed as though the world outside didn't exist, as if poverty, struggle, and noise had been banished at the door. Evelyn's mop bucket squeaked slightly as she rolled it across the hall. She adjusted her uniform, straightened her shoulders, and disappeared into her role, the invisible keeper of order. Richard Halloway strolled in mid-morning, his expensive shoes clicking confidently against the floor. "The Japanese investors are coming tonight," he announced loudly to no one in particular, though every staff member stiffened. Everything must be flawless, and that includes the staff. His gaze lingered on Evelyn for a moment, not out of recognition but as though inspecting a surface for dust. Then he moved on. Marcus Diaz approached her later with a knowing look. "Don't let him get to you," he murmured. Evelyn gave a small shrug. "I stopped letting men like him get to me a long time ago." Marcus grunted. "Still, doesn't make it right." His respect for her was subtle, unspoken, but she sensed it. Unlike others, he noticed the precision in her movements, the way she carried herself like someone who had once stood for something bigger. When the halls emptied during lunch, Evelyn allowed herself a moment of pause. She leaned against her cart, remembering the sand-colored barracks of Fort Jackson, where she had once run drills until her muscles screamed. Back then, she had believed she would build a long career in the military, but life had other plans. An early discharge after her mother's illness, years spent caring for family, and eventually the crushing need for steady income. She never regretted her choice, but sometimes, when the gallery's silence pressed against her ears, she wondered what might have been if she had stayed. Still, regret was a useless indulgence. She had work to do, and more importantly, she had Jasmine's future to secure. Every paycheck went to tuition, books, and the small savings account she hoped would one day grow enough to give her daughter freedom. That thought steadied her, gave meaning to her endless repetition of polishing, dusting, cleaning. The day passed in quiet rhythm, the kind Evelyn knew well. But as she wiped down the glass around a priceless painting that afternoon, a faint unease brushed against her mind. Something about the way the security lights flickered overhead, or maybe the unusual van she had glimpsed earlier outside the gallery. She shook it off, reminding herself she was prone to seeing patterns where others saw coincidence, yet the thought lingered, like a shadow at the edge of her vision. Evelyn didn't know it yet, but the stillness of her routine was about to be tested. The afternoon carried on inside the gallery, the kind of afternoon where the silence almost felt rehearsed. Tourists whispered, the click of expensive shoes echoed against marble, and Evelyn Carter's cloth moved rhythmically across the frame of a glass display. She had learned to let her body work on autopilot, but her mind, sharp as ever, stayed alert. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of something odd. Parked across the street was a white van with no logos, its paint dulled and windows tinted. Delivery vans came and went all the time, but this one hadn't moved since she'd first seen it hours ago. It hadn't so much as shifted an inch from its spot. She frowned, adjusted her cleaning supplies, and forced her gaze away, reminding herself she wasn't security anymore. Still, unease pressed gently at the edge of her thoughts. Inside the gallery, a man lingered longer than most near the main entrance. He pretended to study the art, but his attention drifted too often toward the cameras. Evelyn noticed the way his eyes darted up every few seconds, the nervous shuffle of his feet. Most patrons walked with easy entitlement, as if the gallery belonged to them. This man didn't fit. She made a mental note, the way she once did during surveillance exercises, cataloguing posture, behavior, patterns. During a brief pause, she approached Marcus Diaz at the security desk. He leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee, scanning monitors that reflected the pristine rooms. "Marcus," she said quietly, "there's a van outside. Been there since morning." "Doesn't look like delivery." He raised an eyebrow, half curious, half skeptical. And there's a man in the lobby watching cameras more than art," she replied. Marcus chuckled under his breath. "Evelyn, you always see ghosts in the corners, but I'll have a guy check the plates on the van." "Better safe than sorry," she murmured, eyes narrowing slightly. Her tone gave Marcus pause. He had learned not to underestimate her instincts. "All right, I'll take a look myself after rounds." Richard Halloway's booming voice interrupted the quiet exchange. "Diaz, quit whispering and do your job properly. These investors will be here any minute, and I don't want a single detail overlooked." His gaze slid over Evelyn like she wasn't even there. "Ann Carter, shine that frame again." It still doesn't sparkle. Evelyn returned to her work without protest. She had long since learned to let his arrogance roll off her shoulders. Still, irritation pricked at her chest. Not for herself, she didn't care about his words, but for the blindness they revealed. He didn't see the value in people unless it came with a price tag. As the afternoon light dimmed and the glow of the chandeliers replaced it, Evelyn moved through the gallery's quieter wings. A hum of anxiety pulsed in her chest. She couldn't shake the image of the van, its stillness unnatural, nor could she dismiss the man's strange behavior in the lobby. Her instincts whispered what logic dismissed. Something was coming. Back at the entrance, the man she'd noticed finally left. Evelyn tracked his departure discreetly, watching the door close behind him. She couldn't explain why her pulse quickened as it did, but she trusted the body's silent alarms more than anything else. She finished polishing the final display case and straightened up. Around her, laughter from a group of wealthy guests floated through the hall. They were unaware, wrapped in their world of prestige and self-importance. Evelyn tightened her grip on her cloth, a reflex born of discipline. She didn't know what was about to unfold, but she knew this. Her instincts had rarely failed her, and tonight they were louder than ever. The evening crowd thickened as the gallery filled with soft chatter, clinking glasses, and the muffled admiration of priceless art. Waiters glided between guests with trays of champagne, and the atmosphere seemed as flawless as Richard Halloway demanded. Yet beneath the golden light of chandeliers, Evelyn Carter's unease continued to stir. She glanced at the front doors once more, her instincts prickling as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Across the street, the white van finally stirred. Its engine rumbled to life, then cut off. The doors slid open, and 4 men stepped out. They didn't wear ski masks or draw weapons yet. They blended in with the night like any group of delivery workers. Their stride was purposeful, coordinated and fast. Inside, Marcus Diaz glanced at his monitors and frowned. Several camera feeds suddenly froze, the image dissolving into static. He tapped the screen, then tried another. Same result. "What the hell?" he muttered, adjusting controls. His chest tightened. Security systems didn't just fail all at once. In the East Wing, Evelyn noticed a flicker of the overhead lights. For anyone else, it was just faulty wiring, but her gut told her otherwise. She slowed her steps, cloth still in hand, ears straining. In the distance, a muffled click echoed faintly, like metal locking against metal. The gallery's heavy service door opened with a soft hiss. The first of the 4 men entered, carrying a tool bag that could have passed as a janitor's kit. He moved swiftly, head lowered, and was joined by the others seconds later. Within moments they spread out, their roles wordless but clear. One worked quickly on the alarm panel, another checked comms, the third surveyed halls, while the 4th stood sentinel near the door. Marcus reached for his radio. "Team 1, report, do you copy?" Silence answered him. He tried again, his voice sharper. "Security, report." Still nothing. The line was dead. He cursed under his breath, stood abruptly and scanned the hall. Evelyn, in the West Wing, felt the sudden shift in the air. The gallery had always been a space of control, everything ordered and rehearsed. Now there was tension creeping through its walls, as though the marble itself sensed intrusion. She stopped cleaning and stood very still, her instincts sharpening. Through the reflection of a polished frame, she saw movement, shadows slipping past a corridor they had no reason to use. Her heart kicked harder in her chest, but her breath stayed even. Years of discipline rose within her, anchoring her. Something was happening, and she knew with chilling certainty this was no coincidence. At the main floor, Richard Halloway remained blissfully unaware. He raised a glass in laughter with a pair of investors, gesturing proudly toward a Renaissance painting, as if it were his own creation. His arrogance shielded him from noticing the tightening grip of danger entering his kingdom. Marcus appeared in the hallway near Evelyn, his movements tense. He spotted her watching the corridor and gave a small shake of his head. "Stay calm," he whispered as he passed, his hand already reaching for the concealed weapon at his side. Evelyn didn't move, but her eyes followed him, reading his unease. In the control room, one of the thieves typed swiftly into a small device, and every remaining camera feed cut to black. The gallery was blind. The atmosphere shifted instantly. What had been an elegant evening now carried a fragile silence, the kind of silence that precedes chaos. Evelyn's grip on her cleaning cloth tightened. Her body stood still, but her mind moved rapidly, piecing together what she knew. Whoever had just walked into the gallery wasn't here for art appreciation. Something was unfolding, something dangerous, and she was certain of one thing. The night was about to shatter. The hum of conversation in the gallery died all at once. It wasn't gradual. It snapped off like a switch, leaving only the echo of footsteps against marble. At the center of the main hall, 4 men emerged with sudden precision, their voices sharp, their movements rehearsed. The leader, tall and lean with a cold stare, raised his voice over the startled crowd. "Everyone down. Now. Hands where we can see them." Gasps filled the air. A glass shattered as someone dropped their drink. Patrons froze in disbelief, eyes darting to Richard Halloway, as though the billionaire might wave this intrusion away with his wealth alone. Instead, he straightened his tie, puffed out his chest, and stepped forward. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Richard declared, his tone more annoyed than afraid. "This is my gallery, my collection. Whatever it is you want, I can pay." The leader smirked without humor. "We didn't come for a check. Get down." When Richard hesitated, one of the thieves grabbed him by the arm and shoved him to the floor. Gasps rippled across the hall. Evelyn, standing near the edge of the crowd, lowered herself slowly, her eyes never leaving the men. Her pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm. Years of discipline wrapped around her like armor. Marcus Diaz moved instinctively, stepping in front of a cluster of staff members. "No one has to get hurt," he said firmly, trying to steady the panic, but he too was forced down when the second man waved a weapon in his direction. The guests, men in tailored suits, women draped in gowns, hesitated as though their status could shield them. It couldn't. One by one they crouched on the polished marble, fear settling in their throats. The sound of expensive jewelry clinking against the floor filled the silence. The thieves worked quickly. One secured the doors, locking heavy bolts into place. Another cut the lights in the adjoining halls, leaving only the central chandeliers burning overhead. The third paced with deliberate menace, his boots echoing like a countdown. Evelyn watched every move. She noted the rhythm of their coordination, the way each man fell naturally into his role. These weren't amateurs, but in their efficiency, she also noticed something else. Their focus was outward on the crowd, never inward. None of them looked twice at her. To them she was invisible, just another uniformed worker swallowed by fear. Richard, lying on the floor with his expensive suit rumpled, glared at the leader. "You'll regret this. Do you have any idea who I am?" The leader crouched, his voice calm but edged with disdain. "I don't care who you are. Pure leverage, nothing more." The humiliation reddened Richard's cheeks, but for the first time that night arrogance gave way to silence. He understood now that money meant nothing in this moment. Evelyn's fingers curled against the marble. She stayed still, calculating, her breathing steady. Around her the guests shifted nervously, whispering prayers, clutching each other's hands. A woman beside her sobbed quietly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Evelyn leaned slightly toward her, murmuring just loud enough, "Breathe. Don't draw attention." The woman nodded, trembling, but followed her lead. Marcus caught Evelyn's eye across the hall. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. She saw the same recognition she felt. This wasn't random, and survival depended on more than panic. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he gave the smallest nod before turning his gaze forward again. The leader stood tall once more, scanning the room. "Stay quiet. Stay still, and maybe you walk out of here." His tone was flat, businesslike. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His control was absolute. Evelyn lowered her gaze to the floor, masking the sharpness in her eyes. Invisible, overlooked, underestimated, that was how they saw her. And that was exactly how she intended to remain. For now. The hostages huddled together on the marble floor, the air thick with fear. A sob rose here, a whispered prayer there, but mostly there was silence, the heavy kind that weighed down on lungs. The thieves patrolled with mechanical precision, their boots echoing like a metronome. Every step reminded the crowd that power had shifted. Evelyn Carter sat among them, her knees bent, hands resting loosely in her lap. To anyone watching, she looked like another frightened maid, eyes lowered, body still. Inside, though, her pulse thrummed with steady focus. Years of training had conditioned her to act under pressure, to measure seconds and weigh risks. Tonight, those instincts stirred again, sharp and alive. One of the thieves passed close by, his attention fixed on Richard Halloway, who had resumed muttering complaints under his breath. "This is absurd," Richard whispered angrily. "They don't know what they're doing. They'll never get away with this." His arrogance was almost louder than his words. "Shut him up!" the leader barked. The man nearest Richard grabbed his collar, forcing him down harder against the floor. Evelyn's gaze followed the motion, not out of sympathy for Richard, but to measure timing. When the thief leaned over, his holster shifted just enough to reveal the handle of his weapon. She logged the detail, filing it away like a soldier memorizing terrain. The thieves believed their control was absolute, but Evelyn recognized something they didn't. Control always had cracks, and cracks could be widened. As the leader ordered two of his men to secure a side hall, Evelyn seized her chance. She leaned sideways, whispering to the woman next to her, the same one she had calmed earlier. "Don't move suddenly. Keep your head down." The woman's wide eyes searched her face, then nodded. With slow, deliberate movements, Evelyn shifted back, pressing against the cleaning cart she had abandoned earlier when the chaos began. The thieves hadn't noticed it, just another tool of her invisibility. Her hand slid into the cart's lower compartment, fingers brushing against a roll of duct tape and a small utility blade she always carried for work. She pocketed the blade in one smooth motion, then straightened as though nothing had changed. Her heart beat harder now, but not with panic. It was the drumbeat of readiness, the sound she had once lived by. From across the hall, Marcus Diaz's eyes flicked toward her. She could tell he noticed the subtle shift in her posture, the deliberate calm. His jaw tightened as if to say, "You're doing something, aren't you?" She gave no signal, but the shared understanding lingered between them like static in the air. Meanwhile, the thieves worked quickly at the gallery's security hub. Evelyn could hear faint clicks and murmurs from the corridor. They were cutting into the system, disabling redundancies, ensuring silence from the outside world. But she had already delayed them, even if unknowingly. When she slipped the blade into her pocket, she also knocked her cart just enough to block one of the maintenance vents. It was minor, but it forced the air circulation to change, which would later affect the sensors they were relying on. Back in the hall, the leader returned, scanning the hostages with his cold eyes. He moved slowly, as though searching for signs of defiance. Evelyn kept her gaze low, her breathing even. To him she was nothing, a maid in a faded uniform, someone beneath notice. And that invisibility was her shield. Inside her chest a quiet vow hardened. She would wait, she would watch, and when the moment came, she would act. The thieves believed the room was theirs. They hadn't yet realized that Evelyn Carter had just taken her first step into the fight. The marble floor felt colder with every passing minute, as if the fear of the hostages seeped into the stone itself. People sat rigid, shoulders pressed together, whispering prayers or curses under their breath. Evelyn Carter kept her breathing steady, her gaze drifting just enough to take in the thieves' movements without drawing attention. Marcus Diaz shifted nearby, his hands on the floor, body angled protectively in front of two staff members. He was a man accustomed to tension, but Evelyn saw the frustration written in the hard line of his jaw. His position as head of security meant nothing now. The thieves had stripped him of authority and made him another body in the crowd. One of the men, thick-shouldered and restless, paced near Marcus. "You, big guy. Sit back," he ordered. Marcus complied, easing down, but his eyes flickered briefly toward Evelyn. She caught it instantly. He'd noticed her earlier movements, the subtle reach into her cart, the controlled calm she wore like armor. He didn't speak, but his silence carried weight. He was waiting for something from her. The leader barked from the center of the hall. "We're on a clock." "Keep them quiet." His tone wasn't panicked. It was measured, like a commander reminding his soldiers of the plan. The thieves radiated control, yet Evelyn sensed tension creeping into their rhythm. They were professionals, yes, but professionals under pressure. Pressure made cracks. The second man fiddled with a small device, muttering. "Signal's jammed, boss, but the backup's slower than I thought. Might take longer." The leader's jaw tightened. "Then work faster. No excuses." Evelyn stored that away. They weren't flawless. Even in their precision, delays existed. A patron, desperate for control, suddenly stood. "You can't do this." His voice trembled, though he tried to sound brave. The pacing thief lunged, shoving him back down with the barrel of his weapon pressed against his chest. The man whimpered, the illusion of courage collapsing. Fear rippled through the crowd like a contagious sickness. Evelyn leaned slightly toward the crying woman beside her, whispering again, "Stay low, don't react, they want fear, it keeps people still." The woman nodded, clinging to her words. Marcus's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. "You don't need to hurt anyone. Whatever your plan is, you'll get further without bodies on the floor." The leader turned slowly, eyes narrowing at Marcus. "And you must be the security man," he smirked. "Thought you'd be smarter than to mouth off." "I'm just pointing out facts," Marcus said evenly. "Cops will be outside eventually. You kill someone, they come in hard. You keep it clean, you get time." The leader studied him, then gave a cold laugh. "I'll decide what keeps us time, not you." He motioned, and one of his men yanked Marcus roughly by the arm, forcing him flat. Evelyn's fists curled subtly against her knees, but she didn't move. Not yet. Still, she let her eyes meet Marcus's for the briefest second. He saw it, the steadiness, the patience. It told him what he needed to know. She wasn't frozen, she was waiting. The thieves continued their patrol, but the leader's expression had shifted. He sensed resistance, not open defiance, but something simmering beneath the surface. His gaze swept across the crowd longer this time, suspicion sharpening. Evelyn lowered her eyes instantly, shoulders sinking deeper into the illusion of fear. Invisible again. Yet the pressure was building. The thieves' timeline was slipping. Marcus had drawn their focus, and Evelyn's instincts told her a turning point loomed. She exhaled slowly, steady as stone. If cracks widened further, she would need to move from waiting to acting. And when that moment came, she would not miss it. The minutes stretched heavy inside the gallery, every tick of the unseen clock sharpening the tension. Evelyn Carter felt it in her bones, the steady thrum of danger pressing closer. The thieves moved with restless energy now, their initial calm replaced by clipped commands and sharp glances. Pressure was wearing on them, and pressure always created mistakes. One of the men, the lean figure fiddling constantly with equipment, cursed under his breath. "Systems halfway. Too many layers. It's slower than I thought." The leader shot him a glare. "Then work faster. We don't have the luxury of time." Evelyn's mind turned quickly. If they were still fighting through the gallery's systems, there was a chance, small but real, that outside contact hadn't been completely severed. But that chance would disappear once the tech finished. She inhaled slowly, weighing risk against necessity. Nearby, Marcus Diaz kept his position low, but his eyes followed every movement. His chest rose and fell with a controlled rhythm, though Evelyn could read the tension in his frame. He too was waiting for an opening. Evelyn shifted subtly, pressing her hand against the edge of her abandoned cleaning cart. The blade she had pocketed earlier felt warm against her thigh, a reminder of her decision. But brute force wasn't the first step. Information was. When the pacing thief turned his back, she eased herself down, slipping behind the cart under the guise of adjusting her uniform. In that fleeting cover, she slid along the wall, silent as breath, toward the narrow corridor leading to the small secondary security station. Her movements were measured, each step grounded in muscle memory from years of drills. The corridor was darker than the main hall, its chandeliers dimmed to save power. Her shoes made almost no sound against the polished floor, though she paused whenever voices carried too close. At the end of the hall, the security door loomed, heavy and locked. Evelyn bent low, producing the blade. She wedged it into the panel, pried at the casing, and worked the latch until it gave with a faint click. Inside, the air felt cooler. The hum of dormant monitors filled the silence. Most screens were dead, blackened by interference, but one in the corner flickered faintly with static and partial feed. Evelyn leaned close, her breath steady, and pressed the comm switch. Static roared, then cleared slightly, enough to push a signal through. "Gallery. Hostage situation. 4 armed men. Immediate response required." Her voice was low but firm, every word clipped with clarity. She repeated it twice, then cut the transmission short, unwilling to risk more noise. As she straightened, a sound froze her, boots echoing faintly down the hall. One of the thieves was checking. Her heart thumped hard, but her face remained calm, her body lowering behind the desk. The man's shadow stretched against the wall, his steps deliberate. He paused, scanned, then turned back. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her grip tightening on the blade. Close. Too close. She waited until the echo of his boots faded before slipping back into the corridor. Returning demanded more nerve than leaving. Her cover was thinner now, and suspicion in the hall had grown. Yet she kept her steps slow, even, rejoining the cluster of hostages without a single head turning. The woman beside her glanced up in confusion, eyes wide. Evelyn leaned just enough to whisper, "Stay calm. Help will come." Marcus caught her eye again, reading the faint shift in her composure. Something in her look told him she'd acted, even if he didn't know how. His lips tightened into the faintest curve of approval. Then he refocused on the thieves. Evelyn lowered her gaze once more, her face unreadable. She had taken the risk, sent the call. Whether it reached anyone in time, she couldn't know, but the step had been taken. The storm inside the gallery had only grown heavier, and now she was no longer just waiting, she was part of the fight. The gallery's air felt thicker now, as if every breath carried the weight of dread. Chandeliers burned overhead, their glow casting long shadows that seemed to sharpen every movement. Evelyn Carter sat motionless among the hostages, but inside her mind moved like a blade. She had sent the call. Whether anyone heard it remained uncertain. What she knew with certainty was this: the thieves were growing uneasy. The leader paced the marble with a predator's calm, his eyes sharp and searching. He stopped suddenly, scanning the crowd with more scrutiny than before. "Someone's meddling," he said flatly. His voice wasn't raised, but its quiet certainty sent shivers through the hall. A murmur spread among the hostages, panic fluttering like wings in a cage. The leader's gaze swept over them, dissecting faces, measuring fear. His eyes lingered on Marcus Diaz for a long moment. "Security man, you?" Marcus lifted his chin but kept his tone measured. "If I had something planned, you'd already know." "I've been right here on the floor with everyone else." The leader smirked faintly, then looked away. "Maybe. Or maybe you're buying time." Evelyn kept her eyes lowered, body still, though her heartbeat quickened. He was circling closer to the truth. She willed herself into invisibility, shoulders bent, breathing steady as though fear had broken her will, but the leader didn't pass her by. He stopped just a few steps away, his presence radiating menace. "And you," he said, voice dripping with contempt. The maid, sitting too still, too calm. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward her. Evelyn felt their weight, but she didn't flinch. She lifted her head slowly, meeting his gaze with eyes that were steady but not confrontational. Her voice, when it came, was low and even. "I've lived through harder nights than this. Calm is all I know." The leader studied her, tilting his head as though trying to peel back her layers. "You don't look like the others. They're trembling. You're not." Evelyn held his stare, her expression unreadable. "Fear doesn't help me clean these floors, doesn't help me pay bills. Fear is wasted energy." The thief chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Philosopher Maid, maybe I like that. Or maybe I don't." He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "If I find out you're lying to me, I'll make sure you regret it." Her pulse hammered, but her face remained calm. "Then you'd waste your time on the wrong person." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. For a heartbeat, Evelyn wondered if he saw through her mask, but then the leader straightened, scanning the room again. His suspicion didn't fade, but it moved on. He turned his focus back toward Marcus, muttering, "Someone's outsmarting us, and I'll find who." Around Evelyn, whispers stirred. A few of the hostages, catching fragments of her composure, seemed to breathe easier. It was subtle, but she felt it, the ripple of hope her steadiness created. She hadn't planned it, but courage had a way of spreading, even in silence. Marcus's gaze met hers across the floor. For once, his guarded expression softened into something like respect. He had seen her stare down the leader without flinching. It wasn't reckless bravado, it was control. The leader barked an order to his men. "Tighten the watch. No more blind spots." Boots echoed as the thieves repositioned, their patrol tighter, their eyes sharper. The grip of control was tightening, but Evelyn had planted a seed. The leader suspected her now, but he also underestimated her. To him, she was a maid with a sharp tongue, not someone capable of more. And that underestimation was her advantage. She lowered her gaze again, heart steadying. The duel had begun, not of fists or weapons, but of wills. And Evelyn Carter knew how to win those. The tension in the gallery had shifted. The leader of the thieves was no longer just focused on keeping control. He had a new target in his sights, Evelyn. The way he watched her now, calculating, made her skin prickle with unease. He was no longer fooled by her calm demeanor. She had his attention and she knew it. But Evelyn didn't move. She didn't need to. The threat was clear now. Every word she spoke, every breath she took, was being measured. And yet, the most dangerous man in the room was still ignoring the true power she held, her ability to remain unnoticed. Richard Halloway, however, did not share that luxury. His arrogance, the very thing that had made him a target in the first place, bubbled to the surface again. His eyes darted from Evelyn to the thieves, as if trying to make himself heard over the growing unease around him. "You're making a mistake," Richard said, his voice thick with disdain. He pushed himself up off the floor, ignoring the sharp glare from one of the thieves who stepped forward to stop him. "You'll regret this. Do you have any idea who I am?" The leader didn't even glance at him. "I don't care who you are." His words were clipped, dismissive, but Richard, as always, couldn't let the insult slide. "I am Richard Halloway," he shouted, his voice booming across the room. "I own this gallery. I own this city. You think you can just waltz in here and take what you want? I'll have you all arrested, every one of you." The leader's eyes narrowed, irritation flashing across his face. He took a slow, deliberate step toward Richard, who, despite the threat, stood his ground, puffing out his chest. "Do you think your money is going to save you?" the leader asked softly, his voice a low threat. Richard's response was nothing more than a sneer. "Of course it will. Money buys everything, and you, my friend, are in way over your heads." Evelyn's eyes flicked between the two men. She could feel the anger in the air, the way Richard's defiance was pushing the leader toward a boiling point. But she also understood something that neither of them did. This wasn't about money, not anymore. The thieves weren't here for a ransom. They were here for something far more valuable. Before the leader could respond, the second thief, the one who had been monitoring the security equipment, approached. "Boss, we've got problems," he muttered, his voice tense. There's interference. Someone's been trying to make contact. The backup system's lagging. We need to move. The leader's jaw clenched. He didn't look pleased, but he gave a curt nod. Deal with it. We don't have time for interruptions. Richard, sensing a shift in the air, straightened. You see, even you know I'm not the one you should be worried about. You'll never get out of here with all those paintings. I'll make sure of it. The leader turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Richard once again. You talk too much, he said. The words were calm, but they held an icy finality. Without warning, he took a step forward and grabbed Richard by the collar, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The room fell into stunned silence as Richard struggled against the grip, his face reddening. You don't know who you're talking to, do you? The leader growled. Let go of him. Evelyn spoke, her voice surprisingly firm for someone who had been silent through most of the chaos. The leader paused, his eyes flicking toward her, registering the calmness in her tone. But then he smirked as if to say, You think I'm afraid of you? Richard, still grasping for air, tried to shove the thief's hand away, his face contorted in fear now. Please, you don't want to do this. You don't know what you're getting into. But the leader didn't listen. With a swift motion, he shoved Richard back to the ground, watching him crumple with a sneer. You're wasting my time. The gallery was deathly quiet for a moment. Richard lay there, his breath ragged, staring up at the ceiling. The guests were all motionless, eyes wide, holding their breath. Evelyn, however, didn't flinch. She didn't even look away. Her focus remained steady. The leader had made his move. Now it was her turn. She wasn't invisible anymore. And Richard, for all his wealth and bravado, wasn't the one who was going to survive this night. The silence in the gallery was heavy, pregnant with anticipation. Richard Halloway, now crumpled on the floor, gasped for breath. His pride shattered as quickly as his physical form had been thrown to the ground. The leader of the thieves stood over him. His posture relaxed, but the tension in the air was palpable. It was as though the moment had shifted entirely. The gallery's elite, once dripping in arrogance and pride, now cowered in the face of true danger. Evelyn Carter, still seated on the floor among the hostages, barely moved. Her breathing was steady, eyes trained on the chaos around her, but she no longer appeared passive. The leader's moment of victory over Richard had distracted him, momentarily giving her the edge she needed. Marcus Diaz, eyes sharp, surveyed the room. The calm in Evelyn's demeanor hadn't gone unnoticed by him either. She wasn't just waiting for help. She was planning, calculating, knowing exactly when to make her next move. The thief's eyes narrowed as he turned away from Richard, surveying the room with growing suspicion. Someone's been stalling me. I don't know who, but I'll find them, the leader muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The threat was clear in his voice, and it rang through the gallery like a distant growing storm. Evelyn didn't react, but inside her mind raced. Every move now carried weight. Every second that ticked by was another opportunity, another small chance to regain control. She had already sent a signal out. Now she had to trust that the outside world had caught it. And while she waited, she couldn't afford to make another mistake. She had to think 2 steps ahead. The second thief, still by the security panels, muttered angrily to himself, "This is taking too long. The backup's still not clear. Someone's sabotaging the system. Get it done now." The leader's eyes flicked toward the man, frustration darkening his features. "You're wasting my time," he snapped, his voice low and lethal. "Get it fixed. We're on a deadline, and I don't care what you have to do to make it work." The atmosphere in the gallery shifted again. The thieves were no longer just thieves. They were desperate, unraveling bit by bit. And in their desperation they made mistakes. The tension was palpable. Hostages who had been trembling moments before were now exchanging furtive glances, looking at Evelyn for any sign of movement, a sign of hope. They weren't sure why, but something about her steadiness made them feel like they could still make it through. And that was the key. Fear could freeze you in place, but hope could give you the courage to act. Marcus seemed to feel it too, his gaze locking with Evelyn's. Without a word, he made a subtle shift, turning his head toward the nearest exit. Evelyn noted it instantly. He wasn't just watching, he was waiting for the right moment. But as the thieves scrambled to regain control of their operation, their sharp-eyed leader remained focused on the hostages, his gaze lingering on Evelyn longer than before. He was thinking, calculating, piecing together what he had missed. "You," he said, his voice now more threatening. He pointed directly at Evelyn. "What's your name?" Her eyes met his, unflinching. "It doesn't matter," she replied, her voice low but clear. The leader smirked, but there was an edge to it now. He was trying to break her, to see if her calm was as fragile as it appeared. "You're more than just a maid, aren't you? There's something about you. You don't belong here. What's your story, huh?" Evelyn didn't flinch, her gaze steady. "I'm exactly who I seem to be. Someone who cleans up messes." The leader's expression darkened, his patience thinning. But before he could respond, the door to the gallery, one of the side exits, creaked open just slightly. The sound was almost imperceptible, but Evelyn caught it. She didn't move, not yet. But it was a sound that only she seemed to notice. The world outside hadn't given up on them yet. The leader's attention snapped back to the room, and he took a slow step toward the entrance. His eyes scanned the gallery again, but his focus was narrowing, turning inward, looking for the source of his rising frustration. Evelyn's pulse quickened. This was the moment. The cracks in his control were widening. Evelyn knew that once they opened enough, she would have a chance to act. But it had to be perfect. For now she stayed still and waited. The air in the gallery was electric, charged with the silent promise of something about to break. The tension from the thieves was palpable. Frustration was mounting, and their patience was slipping. Evelyn could feel it in her bones, the flickering edge of their control, their missteps becoming more obvious with every passing moment. Marcus Diaz had been watching, waiting for the right moment to act, but his eyes kept finding Evelyn's. Each time they met, there was a flicker of understanding, a silent communication that spoke louder than words. He could see that she wasn't just biding her time. She was preparing, analyzing, seeing every tiny detail that might give them the upper hand. One of the thieves, frustrated with the delay, kicked the corner of a nearby display, causing a soft clatter. The noise felt like a gunshot in the otherwise still air. Everyone flinched, but Evelyn's eyes darted instantly to the cause of the sound, then back to the men. The leader's sharp gaze flicked to her, suspicion written all over his face. His attention had been divided, between the chaos in the gallery and the growing suspicion that someone in the room was working against him. But now, his eyes locked onto Evelyn, his brow furrowed with more than just anger. He was beginning to realize that she wasn't just another frightened maid. "What's your game?" The leader's voice was low, but it held the weight of a threat. Evelyn stayed still, her face unreadable. "No game, just doing my job," she said evenly, her words betraying none of the anxiety she felt inside. For a long moment, the leader studied her, as if trying to decide whether she was a threat or not. Meanwhile, Marcus shifted subtly, his body language quiet but telling, his fingers flexed, ready to move. Evelyn could sense the change in him. He wasn't just guarding anymore. He was preparing for a shift in the balance. The tension grew as the seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Evelyn's eyes flicked back to Marcus, a fleeting glance, but it was enough. The moment had arrived. He knew it. She knew it. Now they just had to wait for the right trigger. "Check the hostages," the leader barked, breaking the heavy silence. His voice was sharp, demanding. One of the thieves moved toward the group of hostages, scanning each face. The tension in the room tightened even further. Marcus's jaw tightened, his gaze never leaving the man's movements. Evelyn held her breath, her heart beating faster now, but she didn't move. She had to wait. The slightest misstep would betray everything. Her plan wasn't yet in motion, but it was close. So close. As the thief walked past her, his eyes briefly met hers, but he didn't stop. His focus was on the others, but in that moment, Evelyn saw it, an opportunity. The thief's movements were sharp, deliberate, but there was a momentary flicker of doubt in his eyes as he passed. He was distracted, looking for a problem, but there was none with her. She exhaled quietly, a mental shift occurring. She'd done her part, gathered the information, kept them off balance. Now Marcus had to act. He was their point of entry. The subtle nod she gave him was almost imperceptible, but it was enough for him to see. Marcus shifted his weight, his eyes never leaving the thief's back. In that moment, their alliance was sealed. Evelyn had made her move. Now it was his turn. With a slight shift of his body, Marcus made it clear that he was ready. Ready to move, ready to strike. Their timing had to be perfect. They didn't have room for error. The leader of the thieves, still focused on the rest of the room, didn't see the danger that was now closing in on him. The thieves' attention was divided, their focus slipping. Evelyn and Marcus had a window of opportunity, and they would use it. Marcus, ever the professional, waited for the perfect moment. Evelyn, meanwhile, continued to watch. Her eyes flicked toward the thief near the door, then back to the leader. She was no longer just waiting for something to happen, she was in it. And once Marcus moved, they would move as one. In that moment, the stakes had never been higher. But there was no turning back now. The gallery, once a space of quiet luxury, was now thick with the tension of an impending storm. Evelyn sat still, every muscle coiled tight with focus. The thief leader's gaze never left her, his suspicion growing by the second. His earlier bravado was gone, replaced with a wary, predatory energy. He knew now that something was wrong. His boots clicked sharply against the marble, a sound that seemed to echo far louder than it should have. He approached slowly, the air between them thick with silent confrontation. The gallery, once full of life, now felt like a cage, the walls closing in on them. "You," the leader said, his voice low, but carrying a deadly edge. "So you've been trying to play me, I can see it now." He stopped just a few feet away, his eyes narrowing as he studied Evelyn with cold precision. Evelyn didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes remained locked with his, unwavering. "I haven't been playing anything," she said quietly. "I've been doing my job." The leader's lip curled into a slight sneer. "Your job?" "Cleaning up after people like me." His voice was laced with mockery. "I don't think so." Evelyn stayed silent, feeling the pressure building, but her resolve remained unshaken. This wasn't just about surviving the night anymore. It was about proving that the underestimated could still strike back. Behind her, she could feel Marcus shifting his weight ever so slightly, waiting for the signal. He understood now. The moment was almost here. Evelyn didn't have the luxury of time, but she knew one thing with certainty. The leader had already tipped his hand. He took another step closer, his presence imposing, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've seen people like you before," he continued, his voice turning darker, more dangerous. "People who think they're too smart to be caught. You've been stalling me, haven't you?" Evelyn's pulse quickened, but she didn't allow a single muscle to betray her. She nodded slowly, her voice calm but firm. "You're right. I've been stalling, and now you're starting to catch on. But you're too late." The leader stopped in his tracks, confused for a split second, then his eyes flared with anger. "Too late? What the hell are you talking about?" "Your time's running out," Evelyn replied, her tone just a shade colder. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet certainty in her words hung in the air like a challenge. His eyes locked onto hers for a moment, his fury flashing, but something else flickered there too, a momentary hesitation. It was the smallest crack in his composure, but Evelyn saw it. She knew it meant something. He reached for his weapon, but Evelyn was already moving. In one swift motion, she dropped to the side, narrowly avoiding the barrel of the gun as it swept across the air where she had been. Her heart slammed against her chest, but her body was already in motion, her instincts driving her. The leader's reaction was almost too slow. Evelyn's hand was already on the ground, pushing herself up into a crouch. She grabbed a piece of broken glass from a nearby display, the jagged edges gleaming as she spun toward him. The leader's eyes widened as he realized she wasn't as helpless as he had thought. She wasn't just a maid. She was someone who had been waiting, watching, and now acting. He lunged toward her, his anger blinding him to his own missteps, but Evelyn was quicker. She shifted, her body sliding to the side in a movement that felt like second nature. The broken glass slashed through the air, narrowly missing him, but the force of her swing was enough to knock him off balance. His gun clattered to the floor, a sound that echoed louder than any of the earlier chaos. The gallery was silent again, save for the ragged breaths of those watching, the stunned realization that the tide had shifted. For the first time since the thieves had entered, Evelyn Carter wasn't just a bystander. She was a force, and the leader knew it. He scrambled to regain his footing, but he was slower now, more cautious. The arrogance that had fueled him earlier was gone, replaced by a cold calculation. He understood in that moment that he wasn't the only predator in the room anymore. But Evelyn wasn't done. She was already moving again, ready to finish what she had started. The leader staggered back, his balance shaken from the sudden attack. His eyes flicked toward his fallen gun, then back to Evelyn, who stood firm in front of him, her eyes cold with determination. For a moment, the gallery fell into complete stillness, save for the distant hum of chaos now slowly turning toward a conclusion. The air was thick with the promise of finality. Something was about to break, and it wasn't just the thief's control. Evelyn's breath came slow, measured, but inside her mind raced. She could feel her body's tension, the electric charge of action coursing through her. The leader was on the ground, his weapon out of reach. He was still dangerous, still desperate, but he was no longer the one in control. The time for hesitation had passed. The rest of the thieves, sensing the change, scrambled to regain their focus. One of them moved toward the back entrance, but Marcus's eyes were already locked on him. His posture shifted, ready to intercept, but he paused, looking to Evelyn for a signal. Evelyn's gaze flicked briefly to Marcus. He understood. The plan was clear now. This wasn't just about survival. It was about taking control back, one move at a time. They were in it together, no more separating the roles of hero and bystander. They were both players in this fight. With the leader still on the ground, gasping for breath, Evelyn stepped forward, her hands steady despite the tension. She crouched down slowly, just out of his reach, and met his eyes. The fear he had tried to project now mixed with the realization of his own vulnerability. He was no longer the predator. "You thought you were in charge," she said, her voice low and controlled, every word calculated. "You should have known better than to underestimate people like me." The leader's hand twitched, fingers brushing the floor in a weak attempt to reach for something, anything, that might give him power again. But Evelyn wasn't done. She reached down, her hand grasping his wrist with swift precision, holding him firmly in place. "Stay down," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Behind her, Marcus moved. His step was silent but deliberate as he made his way toward the remaining thieves, blocking their exit. The rest of the hostages sat frozen, their eyes wide, waiting for the final moment of confrontation. Evelyn felt the weight of their gazes on her, but she didn't let it faze her. This wasn't about proving something to them. It was about survival. It was about showing that people like her, people who went unnoticed, who were underestimated, could take back control when it mattered most. The leader, now visibly shaken, tried one last move. He gritted his teeth and lunged, but it was slow, clumsy, driven by desperation rather than strength. Evelyn easily sidestepped, her body fluid, reacting instinctively, as she had been trained to do. His effort was futile. Marcus was there in an instant, securing the remaining thieves with swift professional movements. They didn't stand a chance against the combined force of the two of them. His voice was sharp as he ordered the remaining intruders to the floor, hands raised. "Don't move. You're done." The air in the gallery changed again, this time filled with the quiet hum of tension winding down. The thieves had been disarmed, subdued, and the hostages were safe. Evelyn stood tall, her chest rising and falling slowly, the adrenaline of the fight starting to dissipate. Her body still thrummed with energy, but now it was different, calmer. She didn't look at Marcus immediately. Instead, her gaze went to the other hostages, to the terrified faces that had been watching her, waiting for her to act. She hadn't done this for them, not exactly, but she could see the shift in their eyes now. They had been part of the siege, but they were survivors. Like her. Marcus, now with the thieves subdued and the situation under control, turned to her. His face softened, a brief flicker of acknowledgement passing between them. He didn't need to say anything. She knew. "You did good," he said simply. Evelyn nodded. "We did good." And in that moment, with the thieves defeated and the gallery beginning to return to its normal quiet, Evelyn understood something deeper. She had stepped into the role she was born for, not as a maid, not as a bystander, but as a force. She had reclaimed what was rightfully hers, not just her own dignity, but the courage that had always been there, waiting for the right time to rise. As the police arrived, the gallery's doors creaked open, a flood of light pouring in. Evelyn stepped back, her eyes meeting Marcus's once more. The battle was over, and in the end they had won. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as the police neared. The air was still thick with tension, the weight of the siege lifting slowly but surely. Evelyn stood at the center of it all, her body still tingling with the aftershocks of action. The thieves were secured, their movements sluggish and defeated, and Marcus was already on his phone, coordinating with the authorities. The sound of his voice, calm and controlled, echoed in the background, but Evelyn's focus was elsewhere. She felt the stares of the hostages on her, their faces filled with gratitude and awe, as if they couldn't quite believe what had just happened. They had seen her as nothing more than the invisible maid who cleaned the halls, and now they were witnessing her transformation, a woman who had turned the tide in the most dangerous of circumstances. Jasmine's voice echoed in her mind, a whispered memory of her daughter's words. "You've got this, Mom." The thought steadied Evelyn's breath, grounding her as she looked around the room. The gallery, once a place of wealth and luxury, now felt more like a battleground, and Evelyn was at the center of it. She could see the shattered glass, the signs of the struggle, the lingering fear in the air. But she had done it. She had faced the storm and emerged victorious. The police arrived with a flurry of activity, uniformed officers streaming into the gallery, securing the thieves, and ushering the hostages toward the exits. Evelyn didn't move at first, standing apart, watching the chaos calm into order. She could hear the voices around her murmuring with relief and awe, but none of it reached her. Not yet. Marcus approached, his posture relaxed now that the immediate danger was over. His eyes met hers, a flicker of respect passing between them. The tension had evaporated, but the quiet acknowledgement between them remained. "You did more than just survive, Evelyn," he said quietly, the words almost a whisper. "You took control." She nodded, the weight of the night settling on her shoulders. "We both did," she replied softly, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. As the officers secured the last of the thieves, Evelyn turned her attention to the guests, the people who had once looked down on her, who had seen her as little more than a background figure. Now their eyes were filled with something different, recognition perhaps, or a newfound understanding. One of the women, her makeup smudged from the chaos, stepped forward, her voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her words soft but sincere. "You saved us." Evelyn's gaze softened, and she offered a small, tight smile. "You don't need to thank me," she said, her voice calm, the truth in her words simple. "It's just what I do." And just like that, she returned to the role she had always known, quiet, unassuming, invisible. But now there was something more beneath the surface. The mask of servitude she had worn for so long had been cracked, and behind it was a woman who had fought for herself, for the people she loved, and for those who had no idea what strength lay beneath her exterior. As the last of the thieves were led out in cuffs, Evelyn took one final look around the gallery. It was still a place of wealth and prestige, but it had also become a symbol of something else, a place where someone like her could rise, take control, and shift the balance of power when it mattered most. Marcus was still speaking to the officers, his posture relaxed now, but his eyes met Evelyn's one last time. She didn't need to say anything. Their bond had been forged in the fire of that gallery, and it was strong. The gallery was safe, the night was over, and Evelyn Carter, silent, steady, resilient, had not just survived. She had changed everything.